Hey kid, you got great hair. Thank you. You want to be a senator? No, not really. Too bad, you're gonna lose. Wait, what? I'm not. Just kidding, you're gonna win. What are you talking? Congratulations, Senator McKay. What is happening? The Candidate is a 1972 film that follows the campaign of an idealistic young lawyer named Bill McKay, played by Robert Redford, who runs for Senate in California. The film depicts the campaign as a battle between McKay's principles and the political machine that seeks to use him for their own purposes. The Candidate is also a commentary on the changing social landscape of the early 1970s. Only 9 years before, John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and Watergate had not yet happened. At the time, a sense of disdain for politics was at an all-time high. The Vietnam War was still raging, and many Americans were questioning the government's role in the conflict. Richard Nixon was still president in 1972, and there was serious doubt that he would ever do anything to get America out of the Vietnam War, or do anything to address the growing social change in the country. As a whole, it's kind of a snapshot on the nature of American politics and the challenges of governing in a democratic system, especially during the 1970s. McKay is initially drawn into the campaign by Marvin Lucas, a veteran political operative who promises to help him lose the election? Lucas, fresh off the heels of what was ultimately an unsuccessful campaign, decides to just swing for the fences at what can only be described as a definitely, most certainly unwinnable race.
Nobody's gonna beat Jarman Luke.
Tell me something else I don't know.
See, he promises him that despite what happens during this campaign, it doesn't really matter. He's free to say whatever he wants. However, McKay soon realizes that Lucas and his team seem to be more hell-bent on him winning the election rather than helping him say whatever he wants. In fact, he finds that more often than not, they're trying to rein him in, trying to control him, even though he joined the campaign on the promise that he'd be able to say whatever he truly felt. They use focus groups, polling data, they craft McKay's message, they're willing to make deals with special interest groups to secure support, completely contrary to everything that McKay stands for and slowly chipping away at his agency. Despite the many compromises he has to make, McKay remains pretty committed to his principles, resisting all efforts to corrupt him and eschew his values. He refuses to pander to special interest groups or engage in negative ad campaigns against his opponent, the incumbent Senator Crocker Jarman. Instead, McKay seeks to offer a positive, uplifting message that appeals to voters instead of dividing them. This is also a few years before Jimmy Carter was elected president in 1976, and what we sort of see here is almost a precursor. Yes, Bill McKay is principled, but people constantly make fun of him to his face. They chide him for his hippy-dippiness. Some of his more progressive leanings are met with laughter and criticism, even from people within his own party. Age and being too young or too inexperienced for the job is also something that is brought up as a criticism about Bill McKay. And this is not something that's foreign to many politicians even today. He handles most of these jabs with class and dignity, but you can see towards the end of the film it's really starting to get to him.
Anybody want a Coke?
No.
By the time he has his television debate with his incumbent opponent, we see that Crocker Jarman is a more seasoned, more experienced politician. He knows how to make himself look better in front of an audience, more down-to-earth, less haughty than he actually is.
So, I end up in the shower along with everybody else, trying to scrub the oil out of my old gray hair.
He also knows how to co-opt popular policies and viewpoints, a little wishy-washy on them, sure, but he doesn't openly speak out against them.
When I leave here, I am flying back to Washington to introduce the Jarman Watershed Bill, which will include provisions for federally financed disaster insurance.
Whether or not he's actually made any change up on Capitol Hill is not really the point of this movie, but he certainly knows the bills and laws well enough to be able to politicize them and use them to his advantage. And this is why incumbents are so powerful and so hard to beat. It's difficult to win against somebody who is, or at least is perceived to be, more of an authority on things than you are. And unfortunately for Bill, Jarman has had a lot of experience, at least from what we can see in the film, and he's not hesitant to use almost every trick in the book that he can. The media also plays a key role in this film. McKay's campaign is closely followed by the media, and his every move is scrutinized and analyzed, and he is woefully undertrained and not at all savvy on how to appear best in front of a camera. The media is depicted as this powerful force that can make or break a political candidate. The film shows how candidates must carefully manage their image and messages to avoid negative coverage or unfavorable public opinion. Unfortunately for McKay, he has quite a few missteps pretty early on. By the time of the actual election, Bill is completely fed up with it, and can't help but laugh at how ridiculous and yet self-serious they are. We see many different instances where McKay is thrust into the spotlight or into meetings with people where he has to play the wheeling and dealing savvy politician. And he does his best to resist these corrupting influences, trying his damnedest not to become a pawn of the political machine. And it's easy to see why Lucas wanted him to run to begin with. He's a charismatic person, he's a natural leader, he's smart, he's principled, he's opinionated. But what Lucas probably didn't count on initially was that McKay would want to retain a lot of that agency that we see at the beginning of the film. From the very beginning, McKay stresses that he wants to remain authentic if he's going to run. And this is a key message of the film. He does not want to compromise his principles. He ultimately agrees to run because he believes he can make that difference and be himself while doing it. Despite the mounting pressure from lots of outside forces that want him to be something that he's not, he remains true to himself and refuses to pander. Unfortunately for him, he's battling an entire army of political consultants and campaign managers whose entire job, whose expertise is in shaping and molding campaigns and candidates to win elections. The film suggests that the role of political consultants in these modern campaigns has become far too prominent, and something that politicians have to be careful of to not lose sight of their own principles. Though they've promised McKay this and that, no, we're not going to mess with it, you can do it how you want, they continuously creep their agendas into his campaign. They constantly make deals behind his back, they make concessions that he doesn't agree to, and pretty much completely ignore the tenets that he is trying to commit to. The movie shows that despite McKay's good intentions, he's not going to get anywhere on his own, especially not in politics. Even people who claim to be his supporters constantly give him grief about his age, about his haircut, about yada yada yada. Then, partially as a result of the increased efforts of his campaign staff, and the public starting to realize that he's committed and he has ideas, his chances turn from a sure loss to a possible win. Overnight, it seems like everybody starts to really pay attention to him and to want to hear what he has to say. Though he is initially grateful for the increased support, now he realizes he has a lot more on his shoulders, and the increased pressure is not exactly something that he signed up for, nor something he ever even wanted. Remember, Lucas came to him to run, and McKay was initially skeptical, but decided if he could do it his way, then he would sign on. He now realizes that despite his best efforts, he has become a pawn of the political machine. And while you may not ever want to become a pawn of the political machine, you can certainly become a pawn of the PoliticaLens machine, and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. And hopefully you'll endorse this video by giving it a like and sharing it with your friends. I'd like to keep making more of these, and your support really does mean everything. Bill and his staff knew they had an uphill battle, but using Bill's principles for the campaign, they consistently goad him into trying harder and harder to outdo, outwit, outsmart, outplay Crocker Jarman. And the only way he can do that is if he plays the game. What Bill really cares about is social justice, equality, about taking care of people. And though these are admirable traits, that's not really the angle that his handlers are pushing for. So what do they do to keep him invested? They say, "Sure, kid, whatever you say," and then use that position, use his energy to keep the campaign moving. Some would call these kinds of people parasites, or leeches, or hanger-ons. Some people, I wouldn't say that. A lot of the time they're talking around him, talking through him, talking about him to other people, they're making deals on his behalf. Only about half the time, maybe even less than that, is actually spent talking to McKay about what he wants. And if they even do talk to him, it's usually just fawning praise, making him feel better, making him feel like he's doing an amazing job. "You're doing swell, kid," that kind of thing. And I think it's important to note here that as the campaign goes on, only more and more people that we don't recognize just seem to pop up out of thin air. This is kind of indicative of the type of glomming on that candidates can attract. Everybody wants a few degrees of separation between them and somebody they think has the potential to have authority and power. On election night, McKay abruptly learns that he has won. As they watch the results come in and he's ultimately confirmed as the winner, McKay realizes that he's lost all sense of self, all sense of agency. Though his name is announced as the winner of the Senate race, it's not the real Bill McKay. Not anymore. Tired and completely beaten down after relentless pressure, McKay, resigned now to be a cog in the political machine, is ushered into a wayward hotel room, where he asks Lucas the most famous line of the film,
What do we do now?
Wait a minute, what?
This line is so harrowing, and when I saw it for the first time, I sat and thought to myself, this must be how some politicians end up. It's not even just that they become corrupted, but McKay, despite his best intentions, is now completely at a loss. Without his values, without his agency, who even is he? Everybody thinks they know Bill McKay because they've seen him on TV or they've heard his speeches. They know what he's about. They know his ideas. But if they met the man at the beginning of the film, is that the same guy who's going to be a senator in Washington in a few months? And he might do his best, but we'll never know because the film ends after that point, with Lucas not really paying attention to McKay and just trying to do his job, fighting off reporters for as long as he can. He's no longer really concerned with McKay. He's done his job. Even if he has an answer for the question, what do we do now? All this shows is that McKay, at this point, is still only barely keeping his head above water. He's swimming in an ocean that he was never even meant for. So we've talked a lot about it, but what is the actual message of the candidate? I think we can get a good answer by going to the source. What I realized during my research for this film is that the screenplay was a labor of love and honesty, written by Jeremy Larner. Larner had previously worked as a journalist for Harper's, the Paris Review, and Life magazine, and had served as a principal speechwriter for Senator Eugene McCarthy during his 1968 presidential run. McCarthy ultimately lost in that primary to Hubert Humphrey, President Lyndon Johnson's vice president at the time. Because of his experience as McCarthy's speechwriter, I think we're treated to an honest, albeit cynical, look at the world of campaigning through the lens of someone who was actually in the trenches. Because they wanted to get this movie out in time for the 1972 election cycle, Larner had very little time to put a script together. When Ritchie and Redford approached me to write the script, they had a few ideas of what they wanted it to be about, and of the ending as well. One of the reasons they approached me was, I was one of the very few writers who had written speeches for a presidential campaign, Larner said in 2016. So naturally, my experiences with various politicians came into the story. I used some stuff that was directly from the campaigns, but by way of scenes. He wrote for McKay's character the way that he would have written for Bobby Kennedy, but with the addition of some true idealism. I think McKay might have been a shade more idealistic and naive than any real politician. Though, the Kennedy-esque liberals tended, at least, to sound idealistic. They had a definite type of speech. The first thing I learned to write on the McCarthy campaign was a Kennedy speech. McCarthy would have never given a speech like that. The movie released to critical success, surviving accusations of inappropriately satirizing politics and comparisons to Bobby Kennedy. I can kind of see it. And raked in $2.5 million off of a $1.6 million budget, which today is close to $18 million. Not bad. And it later won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. Quite the achievement for something that was conceived and set to film in very little time. Ultimately, I agree with Larner's meaning behind the film, beyond that sheen of satire. I probably would not have written a political movie about a winner, but that ending was given to me, and I turned all the story toward that. The irony of the candidate is he wins, but in the process, he's completely lost himself in the campaign. McKay's journey from this idealistic, strong, politically reticent outsider to a pliable husk of a political insider is a reflection of the challenges facing really any politician who seeks to change the system from within. If I might nerd out just for a second here while making an analogy, it's like taking the ring to Mordor. Even people with the best of intentions will find themselves corrupted along the way. I mean, heck, even Frodo fails the quest, and he held on longer than anybody could have. Even if you wanted to run, even if you had the best intentions, how long do you think it would be before you started making compromises and promises that ultimately can break your spirit or destroy your values? And we can talk all day about how the media is a problem and that optics for politicians is just a nightmare. But ultimately, the candidate's real message is about the role that campaign managers, political insiders, and consultants play in our democracy. They are the main driving force, the main protagonists in this film. Every single deal that is made, they crafted it. Every media appearance, they planned it. The design of what McKay's posters are going to look like, they commissioned it. How his policies are going to play in front of audiences and with the general public, they planned it. The real message here is that behind every candidate is an entire team of people that we never see that determine how this person looks to you. And are they doing it for the right reasons? Some of them probably argue that yes, the ends justify the means, but how much of the candidate, the guy that they're pushing for, is molded, sculpted, manipulated all along the way according to their plans, their values, not his? And that's why I think they made a great choice in making Bill McKay somebody who was initially reticent, didn't even want to run for office. If they had made the candidate somebody who wanted to run in the first place, then the corrupting influences of these political consultants and the campaign managers would have been a lot easier for the audience to accept. But because we know the real Bill McKay is not somebody who we see at the end of the film, it heightens this film's message, this film's theme. That the character representing this film's title is simply that, a character, a front man. He is the candidate, and that's really all that matters to them. It wasn't even really about him or his ideals. It's ultimately about winning. I saw this for the first time last year when I decided that I wanted to start watching some movies from the pre-2000s about politics, and I gotta say, this is a great one to start out with. Even though it's a bit dated, I like the message, I really like the acting, some of the dialogue is a little choppy, but it really does get the job done of helping the audience understand what they're trying to tell us, without it being right up in your face. I happily endorse this movie with an 8 out of 10, and hopefully once you watch it, you will as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this analysis, please be sure to like and share this video. For my older viewers that may have been around when this movie came out, please let me know what you thought of it. And for my millennial and Gen Z viewers, what do you think about it? How much has changed? Do you still believe that this movie holds the same political weight it once did? I hope to continue making more of these types of videos, so please subscribe and click the bell to see more in the future. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.